And then Reverend Dr. Haynes, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce Mrs. Stella Williams, we can go ahead and get started.
All right, I will do just that. Thank you very much. I will go ahead and introduce Mrs. Stella Williams, a community activist, servant leader, gift to our time. She will open up and we will proceed from there. Stella Williams, please greet us.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Good evening, everyone, and I want to say welcome to each of you. Welcome to a great evening of informative and enlightening of experience to our great panelists and those of you who are in listening audience. We want you to sit back, take time to enjoy and be enlightening with what is going to take place this evening. Again, I want to say thank you to those of you who have decided to join us. Most gracious for Dr. Haynes and the panelists. Again, I want to say welcome.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you and we thank God for your leadership and again for the convening of this panel. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation with such an esteemed panel called for such a time as this. I think that our conversation is timely, but at the same time, it's a conversation that must translate into action. And so I am excited that we have a star-studded panel, and they are going to provide us with the kinds of guidance and I would dare say enlightening resources so that we can translate what has taken place in what has been quite a year. 2020 has been referred to as the year of reckoning. When you look up the word reckoning, you'll discover that the word has to do with an accounting between two entities. And of course, in light of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and we can call the roll, sadly and shamefully, stopping in Fort Worth and Dallas, Tarrant County and Dallas County. We also have those whose lives have been senselessly lost. And so our nation says it's a time of reckoning. And the question is, when we hold the nation to account, what kinds of things are we looking for to happen during this accounting? I'll simply begin by saying that this year's election was referred to as the most consequential election in generations. If elections have consequences, and they do, the question is, what must we do to create and construct consequences that will benefit our community? Parenthetically, we already know, it goes without saying, consequences that benefit our community invariably benefit the entire country. So let's get that out of the way right now. But again, if elections have consequences, yes, they do. We have the opportunity, the challenge before us to create and construct consequences in light of the outcomes of the election and in light of the reckoning our nation says that it is going through. I think in this conversation, we should understand and be conscious of what I term the state of the soul of this country. I think it was the president-elect who repeatedly made it a theme during his campaign that this election was about the soul of this country, restoring the soul of this country. Given the outcomes of the election, given the fact that the current occupant of the White House received 12 million votes more in 2020 than he did in 2016, albeit in a losing cause. Question is, what does that say about the soul of a country where he received 12 million more votes? What challenges does that present to all of us? I wrap it by saying we are inspired by a promise and warned by a lesson. The promise that should inspire all of us is something that this panel will lift up and I'm sure unpack for all of us. And that is, we heard the evening the president-elect, Joseph Biden, gave his acceptance speech. He made a statement that I've never heard in all of my years of listening and watching presidential politics and especially acceptance speeches. President Joseph Biden, with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris at his side, made this statement. He specifically thanked the African American community for always having his back. And then he said, and I promise to have your back. That's a promise that we have the opportunity to cash in on as long as we define for ourselves what having our back looks like. But we also have a lesson that warns us. The lesson that warns us comes from 2008. 2008, at this time, we were dancing, partying, celebrating the fact that Barack Obama had been elected President of the United States, the first African American to be elected. Barack Obama is elected, and one can say that while we were partying, the Tea Party went to planning. And because they planned while we were partying, the Tea Party literally set the stage to snatch the next decade. And as a consequence, they took over, and this is the transition right here. They took over local and state offices. They got ready to take over the Senate. And of course, in 2016, through the Electoral College, they had set the stage for what we've experienced these last 4 years. Elections have consequences. This was the most consequential election in generations. Question is, what consequences are we going to create? We have an amazing panel. I'm super hyped to engage them in conversation. I'm going to ask that all of you would go ahead and introduce yourselves. Feel free to make an opening statement in response to this question. And that is, after you introduce yourself, the question is, since Joseph Biden said, President-elect Biden said that he promises to have our back, what should it look like? What should we tell him it will look like for him to have our back? Please introduce yourselves and give your opening statement in response to that question.
I'll go ahead and go. My name is Pamela Young, and I'm a community organizer with United Fort Worth. United Fort Worth organizes around issues of immigration justice, criminal justice, and civic empowerment. And I lead up our criminal justice action team. And to answer that question, I would say in order for President-elect Biden to make good on that promise, he's going to have to listen to the people who elected him. And overwhelmingly, that was Black people in every state who showed up and showed out like we always do.
Right.
So he's going to have to listen intentionally, proactively, like seek us out. And we're going to be there anyway, but he's going to need to make a concerted effort to listen to what are the needs and the issues that are affecting the people who, like he said, continue to have his back. And part of that, I believe, is going to be really laying down the divisive rhetoric and language that I don't know if we can get partisan on here, but that Republicans have offered up, that a lot of Democrats and a lot of more progressive people have also adopted. And that's coming against people who are calling for real radical structural change.
Right.
A lot of time when those suggestions get offered up for real structural change, they are, people are afraid of that, who hold these positions of power. So he's going to have to change that, and his administration is going to have to change that. They cannot be afraid of looking at real structural change, like healthcare for all,
right?
Like education for all. Ending college and university debt that is burying people who need to be productive citizens. Living wages for all, and real accountability for law enforcement all over this country. And even defunding, yes, defunding the police, removing all of the billions of dollars that we put into law enforcement, and repurposing that money into actually building up our communities, because more police is not what keeps us safe. More resources keep us safe. More resources make our communities safer and give us a better quality of life. Therefore, crime is going to decrease and people's needs will be met. So that's what he can do. He can look at structural change, look at how he can be a part of really facilitating structural change and not backing away from that, shying away from it.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pamela Young. Thank you for your community organizing work and service. And I can hear it all because you're talking about structural change. We coming back to all of that. You trying to light a fire already. We just getting started, Pamela. Okay. So since the sisters are starting off on such a high note, we're going to keep it sisterly, because we know, brothers, the sisters showed up and showed out during this election, as they always do. So we might as well hear from the dynamic president of the NAACP TCU chapter, Miss Green. Introduce yourself and answer that question, because Pamela has already set the stage.
She definitely has. Hi, y'all. I'm Dakia Green. I'm the president of the TCU NAACP chapter 6822. And I'm honestly excited to be here, and I thank y'all for this opportunity. But also I want to share with y'all that I'm a social work major, and with that, community organizing goes hand in hand. And I think for President-elect Biden to have our back, he would need to produce avenues for our voices to be heard, producing an avenue for us to have a stance in both the economy and the society, like the resource that he's saying of diminishing student loan debt, so that we can establish a more generational wealth. So I think that's where I stand with producing financial literacy and financial outcomes.
I know that's right. Well, I see why you're the president there at TCU, Madam President. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, I want to hear from this brother right here, because Leon Reed Jr. Is an attorney. This bad brother right here walked 200 miles, walked 200 miles to Fort Worth to meet with the governor regarding police reform. So, Doc, introduce yourself and then tell us your answer to that question. I got a sneaky suspicion it has something to do with police reform.
Well, your suspicions are certainly on point. And I want to let you know, I walked every inch of that 200 miles with my two legs. I didn't cheat a step.
Wow.
Because it's that important of an issue. Good evening, everyone. Sister Pamela, Sister Dakia, Brother Jamal, and the good Reverend Doctor. My name is Leon Reed Jr. I'm a defense attorney by trade. I practice primarily in Tarrant County and primarily criminal defense, although when you're a neighborhood attorney, you learn to do a little bit of everything, because the neighborhood comes to you for a little bit of everything.
Right.
It's very interesting on that question, what's next and what are the consequences? You know, at some point, America has to take a serious look and take serious strides towards building trust of the African American community in the government. Because the government, since our landing here in 1609, has always treated us with a aspect of inferiority. And they've done it in laws. They've written laws that excluded us from housing loans. They've written laws that excluded us from certain neighborhoods. They've written laws that kept us from getting the type of loans that we would need to get our family and our future family members the legacy aspect of real estate. They've denied that from us. And now in today's society, when all we want is justice, we have a difficult time in getting that.
Right.
And so at some point, the government has to take a serious look at itself, recognize how they've treated African Americans, and then start taking those strides. And those strides can be, one, in the Department of Justice, start issuing consent decrees to police departments again.
Right.
Because, and that doesn't mean that department is dirty, corrupt. It means that you've been doing some stuff wrong that you can do better. And the last time I checked, I've never seen somebody get shunned or anything for trying to do something better.
Yeah.
You know, and so the police departments have to understand that, yeah, if you've been doing something wrong and it's time that somebody had to come in and show you how to do it better, that's not necessarily a negative stigma. You should be glad that someone is saying, you know what, you've been doing it wrong. We're going to show you a better way to do it. But there are so many ways that our country can start restoring the trust and building the trust of African Americans. And we still have to do our part, which is making them continue to recognize that we are going to continue to vote and be more active politically and on the local and national level. I think that's what really got everyone's attention, was the amount of African American vote that showed up. And so I'm really looking forward to going deeper into this and going deeper into this discussion and learning from every panel member here, and hopefully asking questions and getting questions that make us all think and take us to another level. So with that, good doctor, I'm waiting to hear from Brother Jamal.
All right. So, Mr. Vice President for Civic Engagement, introduce yourself and tell us again your response to how the president-elect can have our back.
Well, thank you first and foremost, Reverend Dr. Haynes. It's good to see you, President Green, Pamela, and Attorney Reed. I bring you greetings on behalf of the association as the Vice President of Civic Engagement, representing our President and CEO, Derek Johnson, but more importantly, our board member, Leon Russell, who is our board chair, Karen Boykin-Towns, our vice chair, and the millions of volunteers in our community who have made the NAACP be what it is. And so I lift up that framework because I'm a child of California, like you, Reverend Dr. Haynes. I grew up under Alice Huffman, Reverend Dr. Brown. Okay. These are my people. And when I think about these names, I'm actually stumbling into the space that the Black community did not by chance select President Biden, President-elect Biden, and Vice President Harris. 30 million plus African Americans this cycle are eligible to vote for the president. And 84% of Black men, give or take a percentage point here or there, and about 92% of Black women chose Vice President Biden and Senator Harris as their choice. That is the largest progressive voting bloc of any racial or ethnic group. And so when you think about the notion of what that means, there's no other community that showed up in a way and said, here is who we want to lead America. In fact, made the deciding choice. So what we really are saying to the president-elect and the vice president-elect is we don't want to thank you. We want structural policy reforms that are going to make it such that when President Green graduates from college, he has no debt. That if Pamela decides that she wants to give birth to children, she's not struggling from maternal mortality and infant mortality rates that are disproportionately affecting Black women. that Attorney Reed, when he goes into a courtroom, he is not disproportionately trying to advocate for Black and brown people who are being prosecuted at a rate like no other. What we're really talking about is policy change that are going to make life better for Black people. Fundamentally, we understand that we want to change the hearts and minds of men and women. We want folks to love all people, but we also want to make sure that our bank accounts are equal. We also want to make sure that if I decide to go from point A to point B, that I'm not going to be harassed by law enforcement. We are looking for actual substantive change that we can measure and touch, and at the same time shift the conversation and the narrative. And so I believe that President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris have a job to do that's not just about thanking us, but about making sure that they flip all of the policies that have literally created these sort of disparities and make sure that our lives are made better and we can touch it, count it, feel it, and see it in real time.
Preach. All right, so we're going to have us a good time because all of you, and I'm again not shocked, but all of you have set the tone for what I think will be a powerful, profound, yet practical conversation around what we need to do in the aftermath of this election. One of the things that just has me super hyped is the fact that all of you hit on structural change, recognizing that what structures produce outcomes. And so we have a structure in the country right now, economically, politically, socially, educationally, health care wise. All of those structures continue to produce outcomes where we are at the bottom and other folk are at the top. And so I love the fact that you're talking about policies, you're talking about structural change. Talk to us about a prioritized policy list that will recreate structures, restructure this nation, as it were. One great NAACPer is my brilliant frat brother, Bishop William Barber, who says that it's time for a third reconstruction, meaning the structure needs to be redone. It needs to be reconstructed. And so from all of you, I'd like to hear, share with us what should be our policy priorities so that we indeed have this reconstruction, this structural change that y'all hit on in such a powerful fashion. And feel free, whoever is feeling led by the Spirit, jump on it.
Well, you know, I'm happy to jump in. And when you evoke the spirit of Alpha Phi Alpha, I'm celebrating my 21 years in the fraternity. So,
all right,
following in the great footsteps of many great men. But when we think about the policy agenda, the Black agenda that we are facing right now, there's probably two tracks of work that I personally have seen that we are going to be doubling down on. The first is that coronavirus, the national and international health pandemic, has actually lifted up all of the disparities that we knew existed, meaning Black folks are not financially at the same level. We knew that our healthcare system is inadequate. We know that education is struggling in terms of public education. And so when you add up how we respond to the coronavirus pandemic in this country, the structural policies that now have to be reimagined are going to include, what does it look like to invest in Black businesses? Because we know Black businesses have been decimated by the COVID-19 pandemic. What does it mean to actually course correct on healthcare? I know folks were going after the Affordable Care Act. And when I say folks, the current sitting president, we have to actually right size that and even go further, because realize that people and who had no healthcare coverage are now suffering even more because of this pandemic. Public education, you can go state by state. States are literally struggling to decide whether or not they're going to keep teachers on the payroll. So if we don't find the resources to keep public education going, that's going to decimate again the academic agility in our community. And so how we respond to COVID-19 under the Biden administration in the first 100 days is going to be key. But there's a second track I want to lift up that I don't want to ignore, is that the rules of engagement have been rigged in a way that doesn't benefit anything that we're trying to advance. So as the new administration comes into play, they're going to have to deconstruct a lot of the executive orders that have been put in place that make it difficult to even get health aid to communities, that make it difficult to get broadband access to low-income communities so that folks can educate their children at home safely. And so when we think about the policy tracks, we know that healthcare, education, the economy are all wrapped in this COVID-19 response. But we also got to unrig the rules because the Supreme Court right now doesn't look like it's our friend. And when we think about the fight for the Senate in Georgia, depending on how that lands, it may make it even harder to pass legislation that makes sense to make our communities whole. I know I'm preaching to the choir for many of you who know this, but I think as we start to advocate between now and inauguration, it has to be about a proper COVID-19 response that looks at everything under the hood. But also, let's look at some of these rules that are in the way that prevent resources and changes from happening in our community in real time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Let me just say this right quick before our next panelist responds to that. Those of you who are watching us via Facebook Live, you already feel the fire. Don't just get the fire yourself. Don't just warm by this fire yourself. Go ahead, share what's happening with everybody you know, all of your friends. Make sure that they are part of this conversation, because what I'm loving is that it looks like we have the kind of panel, and I knew we would, that is talking about real structural change that meets us where we are. So go ahead, share your Facebook page with your friends and family members, everybody you know, because they want to be a part of this conversation. Also, the beautiful thing is we got Blake and Chelsea who are going to show us how to have Q&A, so you can literally engage with this brilliant panel. So please make sure that you join this, because I'm so proud of Tarrant County. Y'all did the thing in this last election. So we got some momentum going. We want to keep it going. So I want to go ahead and step back. Whoever wants to talk next, you can go ahead and talk. I am looking at the president of the NAACP TCU chapter. I'm thinking she's just ready to go, but all of y'all can feel free to go.
Okay, definitely. So the thing that I'm going to say that we need to advocate for is more focus on the public education that's being provided. I wanted to put an emphasis on that because the relationship between what we're providing in terms of public education for these minority and underrepresented children is impacting what they see fit for what they can provide for others and to the economy. If we're already sustaining them to this built box of what they can do, being that this is the education that we're giving them, then how do we expect them to go out and be leaders and give back to their communities? So instead of putting mothers in this position to where they have to pick and choose whether or not they're going to be able to pay for a private education in these low income, low socioeconomic status communities for private education for their high school or their elementary school children, what can we provide for a public education that is going to benefit them and put them in a predicament to receive even a full ride scholarship in college? These leaders start with the youth first and foremost, and because the youth are an asset, they have the mindset to give back. They have the mindset of what can I do to make my community a desirable place for me and my family. When it comes to Black and brown children, they're trying to gain an understanding of why they're in these positions to where they have to fight to receive better. And so I'm saying that we need to go back to them and give back to them, because they are the root and they are the ones that are going to continue to grow. And we want them to grow in a position, in a soil that is already furnished with the nutrients that it needs, rather than us going back and trying to fix dead roots.
Thank you. Thank you. Well said. Well said. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. Just talking about, everything that we're talking about, it all points back to resources. And, we, a lot of time when we talk about resources, we talk about it as if there's a scarcity of resources. It's not true.
Right.
That is not true. We have a lot of resources in the United States of America, and most of them are tied up in the military, funding endless wars, funding again, more law enforcement initiatives all over not only the country but the world. So the resources are there, and I feel like that is one of the things that we really need to push for is a massive reallocation of funding just within the nation's budget. I'm sure this is a phrase most of you all have heard, but your budget is a moral document.
Right.
The budget that this nation has really speaks to what it prioritizes. And so we need to really refocus and restructure our priorities. That pyramid of what it is that we're prioritizing. We shouldn't have education and housing and healthcare getting the crumbs. Those should be number one priorities in the United States of America if we want to be who we say we want to be. And if we want to produce the things that we say that we want to produce, we need to put our money where our mouth is. And if you want to tie that into Black America, Black folks in America, I'm talking about reparations, okay? I'm talking about wholesale reparations in the form of all of these systems that have structural and institutional disparities aimed at Black people. Those institutions need to be restructured and shored up with the resources that are there in order to level the playing field, in order to bring equity, in order to bring reparations to descendants of slaves, of African Americans here, and really bring those systems, bring our community back to where they need to be, and give them all of the motivation and the backing that they need to really produce all of the things that are inside of us, all of the things that we can offer. Again, everything we need is in the house, right? It's just a matter, again, of reorganizing and restructuring it and really getting a grasp on what our priorities should be.
Good.
And I'm on of the mindset, when I was in college, I learned of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so you have to have certain things in place before you can teach that student. That student has to feel safe. They have to be well fed. They can't be too cold. All of these things have to be in place before the educational process can take place. And I kind of extrapolate that to the Black community. Before we can really reach full stride, I want to feel safe walking outside my door. I want to feel safe in my community. I want to be able to go and travel and move freely about the country without worrying about being unjustly stopped and inappropriately treated and worrying if I'm going to get home. It's a daunting and a scary thing and a frustrating thing to have to teach your kids, don't do this, and basically freeze when you get in a car and get pulled over. Every time I see a new teenage driver, it scares me to death. And I always ask the parents, have you told them what to do yet? Because I've represented the kids who've gone to Sonic at night to get something to drink, and the parents let them go to the Sonic around the corner, and they forget to turn the actual headlights on because they had the daytime lights on, and they think the lights are on in the car, but the tail lights are off, and the police light them up, and they drive as fast as they can home, and the police pull up and guns out, everything, mama running out. Those kind of situations are occurring way too frequently in our communities. And I believe it was the Supreme Court of Massachusetts that stated, Black folk have a reason to run from the police statistically. And that was backed up by a Harvard study. So I want, we have to feel safe in moving in and about America. And there's an old thing that I tell my clients when it comes to bettering themselves. I say the mother lion always eats first. And so if she were to let the cubs eat first, well, then she would weaken herself to the point, if she ate the scraps, that she wouldn't be able to hunt, and then they all die anyway. So she always eats first to make sure she has the strength to keep hunting for the cubs. And then once she's fed and she has her strength, okay, y'all can come eat too. And she always leaves enough for them to get full bellies too. And so why do I say that? As we speak in terms of education, yes, we have to continue to press for better education and have more control in what our kids are actually being taught, you know, so that we can learn real history and not just the history that they want us to know. So we have to continue to press for the next generation. But right now we have a lot of people that have been laid off. As the job markets open back up, some people aren't going to be able to go back to the job that they had. So I would like to see the government make a concerted effort in retraining people, not just for today's jobs, but the jobs of the future. Installing solar panels. What are the new trades? What are the new skill positions in manufacturing and robotics and things that we can retool the grown folk in our society to be able to not only be competitive in the job market here, but as you've seen in the job market around the world, because we're not just competing with our next door neighbor or the guy from across town for jobs anymore. We're competing with third world countries. And so we need to be able to retrain American adults, our brothers and sisters who are coming back and want to enter the job market again. And along that same vein, make it easier for them to get low-end criminal offenses removed from their background after it's plainly clear and evident that the lesson from that situation has been learned, especially given the amount of disproportionate stops, arrests, searches, and citations, which all lead to more of us in the criminal justice system. You know, so when you have more of us in the criminal, you know, it surprises me, Reverend Doctor, and I know you touched on this earlier, you're probably going to swing back around to it, about the 12 million more people that voted for President Trump this time around. This is after 4 years.
Right.
In my lifetime, I've never seen so much chaos in the United States, and this was starting in January of 2016 at airports when you had lawyers, families, blockades, protesters out at airports and stuff, you know, and it never stopped. And the amount of, you know, it's so frustrating, but it hurt me in a sense that when I'm sitting there and yes, we're watching to see who's going to ultimately win, but I'm sitting there also looking at the fact that this man got the second highest amount of votes in U.S. history, and he just happened to get the second highest at the right time.
Right.
But the second highest vote total in U.S. history after 4 years of madness, it kind of really told me what America really thinks about me. Yeah. And when we open the economy and the nation and the state back up, I have to tell you, I'm looking at folk different. And it pains me. It really, I can't really articulate how disheartening that was to me, just to sit here and see that many more people voted for this man to remain president. And so, but just to keep things on top, I know you may swing back around to it. I would really love to see America taking a real investment in its adult African-American community who are willing to work, who want to work, and we just want the same thing every other American wants, and that's for the rising tide to float all the boats. You know, America seemed to have forgotten that old saying that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. You know, there's no I in team. Team makes the dream. Where are those sayings when it comes to us? Right. You know, so and that's all we're asking for is a fair shake and a fair share, and it just seems so odd that they're surprised that the policies that were put in place worked so well. We are the culmination of the policies and the treatment that they put in place at the governmental level and they're surprised that the stuff that they did actually worked,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's crippled our people, and we're just trying to get the stuff situated and get it right so we can all move forward together. But why are you so surprised that the treatment and the policies that you put in place work so well? Is that not what you designed them to do? And so I'm hoping that America and this administration really takes a strong look at our history, recognizes where we went wrong, and like any person with common sense and high aspiration, endeavor to do it better in the future.
Yeah. Well said. And I really appreciate, because I was going to ask this later, but I want to go ahead and segue into it right now, because I think it's going to be very important as we contemplate our next moves that we are conscious of the country that we are navigating. Because again, as Brother Reed said, 12 million more votes this time, even though you've been impeached, even though you have an allergic reaction to the truth, what President Obama calls truth decay, even though white nationalism has characterized so many of your pronouncements and policies, even though xenophobia as a policy has snatched children from their parents at the borders of this state, and yet 12 million more votes, which reminds us that Trump is not the source of all of this chaos, but a symptom. And so my question now is, because before we get into what we're going to do, we got to be aware of the climate in which we are doing it. My question is, what does this election, the 12 million additional votes, tell you about the soul of this nation? And what's more, the kind of work that we've got to do, given the soul of this nation is as sick as it is?
You know, I would say, Dr. Haynes, that for many of us, people believe the hype that we were in a post-racial reality because we had a President Barack Obama not once, but twice.
Right.
Start to think about, and I'm going to name it, white fragility and white supremacy. The data is showing us that by 2044, 2050, the country is going to be majority people of color. So there is a whole group of folks who are nervous, worried, concerned that their power, their voice, their America is not going to look the same. And what Trump, all he did was he stirred up those folks. He got them to really see that, hey, there is something coming. And the question mark is, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to respond to it? And unfortunately, many Americans, too many Americans, decided that they were going to double down and go back into a place of darkness where they saw Black people as the enemy. They saw Latinos as foreigners. They saw women as being less than men. And so because of that, what it really showed, my grandmother talks about this, you know, the devil started stirring the pot, and people who was already with it started showing up. We needed that, though. We needed to see folks for who they really were. We needed folks to actually come forward to dictate who they really are, because then it says, what kind of country are we going to be? And so while he did get 12 million more, there's about 5 million more folks who voted for Mr. Biden. And so in the history, he's the number one vote getter. And so while second place may matter, in this context, it doesn't. And so when we think about where we are at this moment, I think we now have to speak truth to our community members, our family members, our neighbors, and say racism is alive and well. We know that some of y'all don't want your neighbors to look like somebody else. We know that some of y'all are worried about this person taking your job or that person taking your shine. But the reality is the inevitable is happening. Our country is becoming more and more diverse. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to double down, fight ourselves, you know, invest in hate, invest in violence, have folks kill each other? Or are we going to figure out solutions that work for everyone? When Brother Reed talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everybody wants to have a good place to live. Everybody wants to have good food on their table. No one wants to have to struggle to make it. And so if we revert back to this sort of us versus them America, then we're never going to get to that place where we're reaching those needs. And so I would argue in this moment, the mantle is actually in our favor. It allows for us to say, if you are a white working class person and you broke in Ohio, you were broke before Trump, you were broke during Trump, and if you don't get it together with us, you're going to be broke under Biden. So how do we actually flip the paradigm and talk about policies that are going to change income and wealth distribution? If you didn't have health care before Donald Trump, you darn sure didn't have health care underneath Donald Trump. So if you want health, how are we going to achieve that in this country? And so if we don't start talking in that way and really addressing racism head on in this current reality, we'll keep tricking ourselves into saying, oh, Joe Biden won, Miss Harris is the new VP. Racism is gone. No, it's not. It is the same racism that it was yesterday. Today, even though the leadership is changing, how do we address the root causes of that? Back to the structural pieces. How do we address the inequalities that are affecting all of us? Back to wealth disparities. How do we make sure that we address it head on and not put it in a closet and hide it for another 4 years? So I believe if we do our jobs right, not only do we change the policies and the structures, we actually start to have real conversations. Because I know in Texas, there's a whole lot of folks who are worried because every day there's about 50,000 Latinos who are turning 18 in this country. And they are becoming voters. And in a minute, they're going to vote some folks out. What does it mean to engage with that community in the right way as opposed to ignoring it or putting it in a closet?
Wow. Well said. Well said. I want to hear from our community organizer now because Jamal brilliantly unpacked the fact that we've got to have some policy changes, the structural changes. All of you have said that, to be fair. And one of the policy changes that our dear community organizer has dared to bring up again, boldly, audaciously, courageously, defund the police, which scares the daylights out of people. Would you please, Madam Community Organizer, in all of your brilliance, unpack for us, Sister Young, what are we saying when we say defund the police?
All right, I'm going to actually take a second here to read a definition because I really want people to grasp and understand what defund means and what it doesn't mean. So I'm in community with a lot of organizers all over DFW, including in Defense of Black Lives, Dallas. And they put forth a really succinct definition that I think everybody can really grasp.
Right.
Defunding the police means divesting funds from the police department and reallocating the funds into non-police forms of public safety and community support. And it's that, people want to make, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So folks want to make defund the police something big and scary and complicated. And
right.
That means that we're not going to have the police anymore. Okay. Or that means that the police aren't going to have the funds that they need to do the things that they need to do. That's not true. Actually, it's defunding the police actually makes for a safer community, because what we understand through data is that the police, not like 80 to 90% of what they respond to on a day-to-day basis has nothing to do with keeping us safe. It has nothing to do with ending violent crime, okay, or even solving violent crimes, okay. Most of what they're dealing with are things that can be outsourced to civilians in the community, people who don't carry guns. Okay, people who, when they come to a situation where someone is stopped, stranded on the side of the road, they can assist without shooting somebody, if things progress in a particular way. It doesn't even have to be that type of situation. And so that's what defunding the police is. It's saying, listen, the police, they've been burdened down with being mental health professionals, to be educators, with babysitters, with trying to, be a food pantry. Okay, All of those things are not what we need the police to be doing. What do we need? The police respond to crime after it has already been committed, and we need more police, right? Doing things like the police that we currently have. They need to be focusing their attention on solving crimes that have already been committed, okay, and on responding. I've heard in Dallas, that the response times are, longer and longer. Even here, I had an incident, unfortunately, in my own residence, and the police never came.
Right.
I was reluctant to call them in the first place. I
Right.
called several other people and ended up finally calling them to try to make a report. They never came. So we need them to refocus their attention on doing the things that they were actually, I don't want to say built to do, because we know that what they were built to do originally, but they need to focus their attention on solving crimes and responding to crimes, not on doing things that the community should be doing when it comes to mental health care. So many of the calls that police get, so many of the situations that they are tending to, they have no business tending to those situations.
Not at all.
Situations should be outsourced. Those situations should be funneled to people who have mental health professional training, who can actually bring about a positive outcome in these situations, rather than putting more people in jail and increasing, our numbers in our mass incarceration here. We're number one in the world. We're number one in the world, and Texas is number 1 or 2 in the nation.
Right.
Incarceration rates. That has got to stop. And so this is what we say when we talk about defunding the police.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Brother Reed, you want to add to that?
I don't have, that I've said it before. It goes without saying that as our population continues to increase, as Tarrant County's population continues to increase, because it can be a wonderful place to live, that as the population increases, you're necessarily going to need more police officers, and they're necessarily going to have to be equipped more properly. But former Dallas Police Chief Brown, laid it all out. Police officers are being asked to do too much.
Too much. Right.
And that was from him, from his mouth, from a police chief. We're asked to do too much. And there are only so many of us. And so when we get asked to go get the cat out of the tree, we're not, doing something that could address violent crime, as Sister Young stated, and so and then, just it kind of bothered me that when I was, the day that I walked into Austin, the governor chose to come to Fort Worth that day. But, when you look at that and you say, the way that played out, and the way that they intentionally and purposefully take the terminology and shape it to be a tool and an instrument of fear. And that's really unfortunate and in a lot of ways sad. So because on the local level, we elect our city leaders to make good fiscal policies and good fiscal decisions. In every organization that I've been in and that I've ever come to know, at every church, everybody looks at the budget, and in every household, as Sister Young said, you should be looking at the budget. And when you look at the budget and you see that there's too much here and or it's left, then it gets reallocated. And if you're going to punish my elected official at the local city level for stopping, thinking, and saying, you know what, we can take some of this money, this year and put it over here, then you shouldn't have run for governor. You should have ran for city council.
Mm.
Because that's what the local government officials are there to do, to make that kind of decision when it needs to be made. If it needs to be made, they shouldn't be punished for it, nor should that municipality when they're doing what they were elected to do. So that was kind of it always has perplexed me in that regard. Why are you going to punish someone who is an elected official, him or herself, for doing exactly what they were elected to do, and that's being fiscally responsible? If that means money is going to have to come from the police department to do something else, and it's the fiscally responsible and prudent thing to do, then they shouldn't be penalized, nor punished, nor shunned, or anything else for it. And the police department should also understand, like, yeah, we didn't need that money, you know. And so, because everybody's familiar probably with those old weed and seed terms, and where you're supposed to weed out the bad, and then you're supposed to plant. Well, they did so much weeding and bought every tool that Home Depot sold and that Lowe's for weeding, but didn't do anything much for seeding and planting back. And that's where Sister Pam is going. Whatever happened to the money that was supposed to be invested in growing the grass and in watering it and in nurturing it and fertilizing it? But we went out and got every tool, and a lot of them are standing up in the garage, real shiny, hanging up on pegs, and still haven't been used and probably won't. But we got them, and that's what we can, So no, that mindset, it perplexes me, and again, it is just seriously disappointing when I hear government officials use that verbiage in a way that is by design meant to obfuscate and detract from what the underlying meaning is. Okay, we're going to need police, and even the governor, at least he said, we just need to train them better. Hello, that's what we're saying.
Yeah,
you can stop right there. You said the word, pass the tray and let's go home. But instead you choose, it just amazes me that they choose to turn that into a term of fear, as if we're saying get rid of police departments. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody wants to do that. And we're not talking about everybody walking around with 6 shooters and having self-justice. That's just crazy, and they should really stop in that regard.
Right. Thank you for that. And you all are doing a great job of making it plain, because it was so sick to me to see during the recent campaign those using defund the police as some determination to rid ourselves of public safety. And what we're doing is reimagining public safety, what public safety should look like. And so I'd love to hear the president, NAACP TCU chapter, talk to us when you think of public safety, when you reimagine public safety. What does that look like? What are you? What are your colleagues? What are those in your chapter? Because you have police officers on TCU's campus, and so the question is, what should public safety look like now, since we're talking about police doing too much? What should it look like? Talk to us about how you imagine public safety.
So for public safety, for me, I think the first thing that we need to do is dismantle the fear that is associated with trying to seek out help and be supported in that avenue.
Yeah.
Because first and foremost, with our own on-campus police officers, we had to get them as far as we could. I mean, but to understand that it's not about what you think that we need, it's about what we're telling you that we're experiencing. There's only so far that you can get based off your own prior knowledge when you're not the one that is walking around this campus not feeling safe, when you're not the one that's disproportionately represented on this campus. So first and foremost, it's just, again, that fear that we've all discussed in these different avenues, but most importantly in public safety, that when we call you, you're going to answer. Off of personal experience, there is like a shuttle that transports you across campus. And I've called using Dakia as my name, and I've also called using Ashley, my middle name, as my name, and I've received faster service using Ashley.
Wow.
And so, again, that fear of not having to shut out who I really am to receive what service you are there instilled in place to provide. So, yeah.
Wow, wow. That illustration right there, that's powerful. That's powerful. Pamela, that's everything you're saying. So
That is heartbreaking. That's
yeah,
heartbreaking. And that's a perfect example of something. And I don't know if you're saying that the police, the TCU police, are the ones who provide that shuttle service, or is it another entity?
It's overled by the TCU police, but the entity is student representatives.
Okay, okay. See, and that's again when we're able to take the police shouldn't have anything to do with that. I'm not sure exactly how everything is working on the TCU campus, but again, when we take those functions and we put them in the hands of people who are directly impacted, people who live in the community, people who work in the community, then they have a more compassionate response, right? And they're not afraid of people that they are supposed to be serving and interacting with, because probably they're not carrying a gun, so they're not thinking about getting home and all of those things that we hear from police all the times. And so that's really a perfect example of putting those functions back into the hands of the community so that there can be a more compassionate response.
right. And you all pray for us in Dallas because you heard our mayor and governor got in bed together and have brought, Texas state troopers because they think that is the way to solve crime here in Dallas. And so you all pray for us because, there are those of us who are going to be fighting this, of course, but at the same time, they are already on the ground and you know what communities they target and you know the kinds of things that will be taking place. And so I really appreciate all that's been shared. Let me ask this question now as we get ready to move toward the end, because we've shown as a people, I love this, we've shown as a people that we know how to protest. We can hit the streets and declare no justice, no peace. We've shown that we can go to the polls and make a difference in terms of election outcomes. Question now is from protest to the polls to power. The question is, how do we bring about change? And so for those in the audience who are saying, okay, so what can I do? What can I do? What can little old me do with my average self? What can I do? I'm just one person. What kinds of things can I do to bring about change? I'd really like to hear you all just inspire and inform our audience as to what they can do now in the aftermath of the election so that we just don't sit on our election laurels, but instead we translate it into power.
I would jump in and say, given the discussion we just had about reimagining public safety, how do you turn a Dallas into an Austin, Texas? So you saw that Austin, Texas decided, city council, to reimagine public safety and take $150 million and shift it elsewhere and to create a new initiative. It's not perfect, but that is an initiative that needs to happen in multiple cities across the state of Texas and across this country. So as an individual, if you live in, say, in Austin, Texas, support the city council members who made that decision, because I know your governor has been beating up on them.
Right.
In Dallas, how do you bring that type of policy solution and discussion into the fold and say, if Austin can do it, I know Dallas can do it. If Austin can do it, I know Houston can do it. And figure out what it will take to get folks to buy into the right narrative. When you talk about reimagining public safety, that's literally what we're talking about. Divest, invest. We've been doing that for hundreds of years in the Black community, trying to figure out how to take from what shouldn't be invested in and investing it back in our community. I would argue, Reverend Doctor, that one of the things that demonstrates our power is that when 10, 15, 20 people start protesting, the other side, whoever they are, gets nervous. So you need protesters. You need folks shaking the table. You need folks in the streets. My grandmother says it best. You need folks in the streets, you need folks in the hallway, and you need folks in the boardroom. And if all of us are aligned with the same agenda, if we all understand that we're working toward the same goal, Movement for Black Lives, NAACP, the Black Church, if we all are on that same wavelength, then we actually can make change happen. And it's not about big goals. It literally can be in Dallas, we want to make sure that 10% of the policing budget gets reinvested in the public schools. President Green, and maybe let's do a study on my campus to make sure that this car shuttle service is actually servicing people of color and women equally, not based upon names. There's research that can happen. Universities know what that looks like. So it's literally taking what you know and figuring out how to flip it so that we have a new reality. And it still requires one thing that we all know how to do well, and that's organize and advocate. Because once you win an election, that's the beginning. It's not the end. And so we got to keep the gas on the pedal, or the pedal on our foot on the pedal in terms of the gas, and keep the pressure on.
Yeah, good.
And I want to piggyback right on that, Brother Jamal. This, I think the question was, what do you do after the election? What do you do after the protest? You keep protesting. You keep marching. You keep organizing. You keep the pressure on. And you keep also organizing for elections. Guess what? In May of 2021, the city of Dallas and the city of Fort Worth will be electing all new city council persons. Okay, everybody is, at least in Fort Worth, everyone is up for re-election.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we need to start what we should have started yesterday. Many have, on organizing toward that election and making sure that we have progressive candidates, people who hold our values dear to them, who are going to be challenging every single incumbent. Also, the fight is not over. We may have won the top ticket with Joe Biden. We'll see, I guess, on January 21st when everything pans out. But we're pretty sure that that's going to happen. However, if he does not have a Senate, okay, who can help get policy that we've been talking about, structural change, passed, then he's what good is he? Yes, he can do executive decisions and things like that, but he needs Congress, he needs that Senate. And so everybody, I don't care what state you live in, you can be organizing right now to help Georgia. They have a Senate runoff
Good.
for grabs on January 5th. And so from now until January 5th, in your home in Fort Worth, Texas, in your home in Dallas, you can send text messages to Georgia voters. You can get on the phone and be a part of phone banking, which is simply making calls to potential voters, telling them, hey, remember, you can mail in your ballot. They have mail-in ballot voting there in Georgia, and they can request those ballots now, and they can send them in, and they can go and make sure that they're registered to vote so that they can go and vote in person if they want to. So you can be a part of flipping the United States Senate, okay, through those 2 Georgia seats. And just some practical tips to do that, I would say Google or Facebook, whatever way you search for information, the New Georgia Project and Fair Fight Action.
Right.
Both of those organizations, founded by Stacey Abrams, who has been instrumental in really cultivating the electorate in Georgia, so that they even got Georgia went for Biden, first time for a Democrat in I don't know how many years there in the state of Georgia. And it was because of the work that Black women like Stacey Abrams did on the ground for at least a decade. And so we can be a part of bringing that victory home, not only for Georgia, but for the entire United States. If we get those 2 seats flipped, then it will be even 50-50 for the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate. And the tie-breaking vote will be Kamala Harris. And so we will have a slight majority there that we can really get that structural change that we've been talking about.
Good.
Now, Sister Takia, I'm going to put you in the cleanup spot. That's the spot where they put the home run hitter up. So I'm going to creep in and try to get on base before you real quick, and then you bring it on home.
She can handle it.
I know she can. She a horn frog just like I am. Look, for anyone listening to this, whether it's in the tens, the hundreds, or the thousands, and I certainly hope it's in the thousands that this gets disseminated to. If you don't take away anything else from what I've said tonight, please consider taking this away: education, organization, and voting. That's been parroted by almost everyone here. Education, organization, and voting. Leon, what do you mean by educate? We have to educate ourselves on how our government works. People don't know what primaries are. People don't know what the three branches of government are, how they intertwine. And because we don't know, people can talk circles around us and say something that could lead us to vote against our own interest. But when we're educated about certain topics, when we're educated about the government, when we can get the churches start showing documentaries, the 13th, or different forms of documentaries that are on PBS. I saw a good one that's out right now on Reconstruction, and it gives a history of a lot of these organizations and how it came to be, and how we had Black Congress people immediately after the Civil War from states like South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, because the South lost.
Right.
And they said the Black folk get the vote, and they voted in Black Congress people way back then. But then in Reconstruction, when they saw how powerful our vote is, that's when organizations like the Klan were started. They were started to keep us from voting. That's why they put poll taxes and all of these other things to try to keep us from voting. That's when they started in modern day times gerrymandering and trying to have 10 forms of ID and all to keep us from voting. Why? Because whether you're a billionaire or you're flat broke, you get one vote. Whether you're the landlord or you're the tenant, you get one vote. Right. Whether you have a GED or a PhD, you get one vote. Your vote is your equalizer. It is precious. And so Sister Pam is right. This wasn't a one-time thing. There's another election coming right around the corner, and you need to vote with just as much vigor in that election as you did in this one. Because if you send someone up there to do a certain thing and then you don't give them the support that they need, then you're setting not only them up to fail, you're setting yourself up to fail. So we have to keep, on the gubernatorial cycle, it's notoriously low voter turnout. Please stay engaged. Find an organization where you can fit in. Find an organization that's doing something. The organizations now are starting to yoke up together because there's strength in those numbers. So you want to stay busy, find an organization, get into it, get involved. And if you're not doing enough in that, you're not feeling it, then find another one to get into. And associate yourselves with like-minded individuals who want to get involved, who want to learn more, who want to know more, okay? And then when you do protest with a purpose. If you're going out just to be on Facebook that night, you're really not helping. When Dr. King and in the height of the human rights movement of the 60s, when they protest, they always had a purpose attached to the protest. And if we as community leaders and in our various organizations, if we have to pass the hat and send somebody to the National Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta and go and look at the notes that they took on how they set up protests and just learn what they did in order to, one, keep the people safe, but in order, two, to get the point across at the end of the protest, send people there. Go yourself. If you can't go, send people and tell them, bring it back, bring that knowledge back. But get involved, educate yourself, stay organized, vote and protest with a purpose in mind. Sister Green, bring out the big.
Bring it home. Bring it home.
Thank you. So going forward, it's about having a prominent voice and stance that doesn't fade away. It goes further than the protest, but also it can be right at your own doorstep, right at home. Being a part of a generation that prides themselves on digital civic engagement, We have, with that, it comes responsibilities. Continue reading the circulating news, signing petitions, circulating fast facts, writing emails to elected officials or community organizations on your disputes and how you can support them. Survey your community about the prominent issues that are being overlooked. You can start donation drives for your local organizations and just make sure that you're being a part of an online community that is pushing forward for progress and for change. But also with that, you can build up your own community by getting involved, grabbing a friend to go to a training to where you can, for yourself, register voters in the turnout. So you can be that person on campus, in your educational facilities and whatnot. So we're not just staying still and staying stagnant, but also there's even other ways to be efficient and beneficial to the movement and the change. You can do creative participation. Artists have used their platforms to get the message across. Even Toni Morrison during the Panther Power, during the Black Power movement, used her As I Am and books to get out messages to readers about the persistence and the enabling of their voices and how there is power in what we say in our stance and power in the confidence that we hold.
See, you were the one to wrap it. You were the one to bring it home. You did that. You did that. Let me, let me also remind us, because you all have been so powerfully both profound and practical, that January begins the legislative session in Austin. And so we have to stay on top of the kinds of pieces that will be passed in Austin. As a matter of fact, if the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice, it's because we bend it. And we have to be in Austin representing, we have to be in Austin conscious of the kinds of things that are being passed. And so I do know that one of the things that they're working on, Sister Pamela, is a piece, I think the George Floyd Police Reform Act. And so that's one of the things that we need to ensure, gets out of committee and has a vote, and we maintain and we hold account, those who are voting on that. That's just one of the things. Again, come May, all of us have a responsibility. If we turned out in May like we just did in November, it would upset everybody, because they would know that we are an awake electorate and we're not playing. And so I close with this. Martin Luther King Jr., after the 1964 Civil Rights Bill had been passed, goes to then President Lyndon Baines Johnson and says to Lyndon Baines Johnson, this ain't enough. We need a voting rights bill. We've got to have a voting rights bill. And Lyndon Baines Johnson said this. He said, man, I don't have the power. I don't have the votes to get this done. Dr. King said, all right, so what we're going to do, we're going to go give him some power, and went down to Selma. And of course, that led from Selma to Montgomery. And the next thing you know, LBJ is on TV saying we shall overcome, because again, I've discovered and strongly believe that the power of the people is always greater than the people in power. We've just got to exercise our power and give the right people the power. Here it is, to be transformational leaders and not transactional. So I'm excited that we have our homegirl from the Bay Area as vice president, but we got to give her the power to enact the kinds of policies that will indeed be transformational and not just transactional. Let me just say thank you to Kia Green. I know TCU is in good hands. Better than that, our future's in good hands because of your brilliant, bold leadership. Jamal Watkins, homie, proud of you, man. I'm calling Amos Brown tonight. Alice Huffman, tell them that you are throwing down and holding up the light brilliantly. Hold up that light. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? And then, of course, Leon Walkin Reed. Man, you advocating for us. I'm so proud of you. You can put that down. I'm so proud. I'm so proud of you, man. And I believe, and I'm so excited because when Johnny Cochran passed, my question was, are we going to have another advocate to step up like Johnny Cochran? Man, you doing that thing in that spirit. So I salute you. Thank God for you and for those feet that keep on walking. Feet, don't fail me now. And Pamela Young, you organizing. And I thank God for you. I thank God for your consciousness. I thank God for our connection across Dallas and Fort Worth, Tarrant County, Dallas County. Y'all pray for us over here because the fight is real. And the sad thing is, and please don't miss this, you can have black faces in high places presiding over a system of white supremacy. And if they don't recognize they have a responsibility to transform the system as opposed to just preside over the system, the whack thing is, you just got a black face who is presiding over a white system and legitimizing it in the process. So y'all pray for us over here. We praying for y'all over there. And we are excited about Tarrant County, Fort Worth, because y'all represent what leadership ought to look like. Much love for you. Keep up the great work. That's all I have to say. What's up?
We do have a couple questions from the audience. We've got about 9 minutes left, so we can take a couple of these. I will read the first one. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone that joined this evening. We've had over 50 people attend through WebEx and a lot more on Facebook Live, so thank you all so much for being here. The one question we have from Mr. Spears is, are there any current efforts or organized efforts that we can be named that viewers can reach out to get involved in local efforts? And I know we kind of talked about that just a little, but can you all expand on or give some names of things that people can join and get involved?
Yeah, I would definitely say in Fort Worth, one organization that folks can link up with is United Fort Worth. We're actually building coalition right now with other grassroots progressive organizations to vet and get people ready to run for the May 2021 municipal elections. And we don't want to just, find people to run, but we want to support them. We want to make sure that everyone is running on a platform that enriches our community, especially the most marginalized communities. So I just say United Fort Worth, also Fort Worth Futures, also Community Frontline. These are all great organizations right here in Fort Worth that folks can connect with and sign to the work. We're also going to be doing work around the legislative session and making sure that our priorities are taken care of there with our state representatives. And there's so many more different initiatives. And we're always open to ideas as well.
And if I may, I would also, and I'm not, Walk for Reform wasn't a one-time thing. It is an ongoing thing, and we are looking at going back to Austin during this next legislative session. And we had input from people walking from San Antonio, walking from Houston, and walking from DFW again, because somebody asked, how many people does it take to walk to Austin for the governor to pay attention to you? And I said, maybe we do need to do another one. And next time have relays where people can walk one day, pass the baton to somebody, they walk another day. And then when the time comes, we all end up down there, maybe either around MLK Day or in the month of February, which is the month they set aside for us, and show up. And we're going to be reaching out to those state representatives and Senator West, because we have ideas for the George Floyd Act that's all evidence-based and well-researched. So if you're interested and you have things to offer on that level, be it organization, website, data collection, feel free to reach out to us at walkforreform@gmail.com. walkforreform@gmail.com. We'd love to have you on board. And we're in touch with a lot of different organizations. Like I said, you get in somewhere, you'll find that there are people and places that are willing to help and use you.
Amen.
I just got a text from our friend, Council Member Casey Thomas in Dallas, who wanted to make sure I lifted up that folks can join the Facebook group, Our Vote is Our Voice. And I know he and the Dallas branch have been working, Fort Worth, all of you have been working around census. We're about to pivot to redistricting. And then Pamela lifted up something very important. We are doing a great work in Georgia with Leader Abrams and Say Ufot. We have 30,000 folks who have already signed up to text their neighbors at naacp.org/volunteer. And when we say text your neighbor, you can text your neighbor in Georgia from Texas. And so we have a program that allows for you to text and phone bank from the comfort of your home. If you go to naacp.org/volunteer, we're going to continue to do that work. In Texas alone, under the leadership of Gary Bledsoe and others, we were able to reach 70% of potential Black voters before the general election through radio, digital, phone banking, and text messaging. So the program works because you all are working it. So we want to continue to do the hyper-local work, but also if you can help our friends in Georgia, which will help this country, as Pamela lifted up, we can change the game in another way to help our homegirl from the Bay Area have some real power to move an agenda that works for our community.
Good.
I wanted to add one more thing. The three organizations that I mentioned, you can find all of those actually on Facebook: United Fort Worth, Community Frontline, and Fort Worth Futures. My organization, United Fort Worth, pinned to the very top of our Facebook page is a Google form. And you simply click on that and you can sign up, get on our mailing list so that we can stay in touch with you and give you updates and let you know about different ways that you can engage with the work.
And the Fort Worth chapter of the NAACP.
Right. Duh. Yeah. Any more questions?
We've got, let me see here. There's one last question I think we should answer, and it's how do we, and we can do this quickly, I only have a couple more minutes, but how do we monitor our success? So after everything we've talked about as a community, how do we monitor it going forward? Like, how do we tell if what we're doing is successful, and what would that look like?
Good question.
You know, I would just say, and this is and it's gonna sound real simple, are the people you're representing, are their lives better? Is the community that you're representing, is it looking a lot better than when you started this work? And that just means you got to keep doing the work, but it is time to pause and say, are we really making a difference? Are we just making a lot of noise? And so I know that the Fort Worth Tarrant County branch, the NAACP, the state conference in Texas is fighting forward. But at times we got to press pause and say, are people who we are representing, did we make a difference? And that means measuring and counting and looking at real-time experiences, because that, to be honest, is how we actually move forward, is by making sure that we're moving the needle forward. And that doesn't mean that if it takes us 10 years to make change happen, it's okay. But keep on it and keep at it. But at the same time, really question, are we being effective at making life better for the people we serve? That, for me, is a philosophy that I know really should, in my opinion, drive the work that we're doing ultimately.
All right. Well, with that, we're just about here at an hour and a half. Thank you guys so much for being here this evening. I really want to thank all of our panelists for your time. We really, really appreciate this wonderful discussion. I hope our community really finds some value in the things we discussed. And I do want to encourage everybody to please, visit the NAACP website. There's lots of resources there for you on the national level and your local, the Fort Worth, Tarrant County. But really, we couldn't do these types of programs without your support. So really just want to thank everybody for being here this evening. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and end our Facebook Live and recording. And if anybody has any last remarks, please feel free to hop in. But just really from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much.
Take up space.